After Elena won the competition, Mr. Boss invited Elizabeth and Leping to a gathering. Mr. Boss asked Elizabeth and Leping to please take their seats. However, Leping was really confused, wondering why he was invited to attend this gathering again. Elizabeth replied, saying it's not a bad idea to learn more about the current affairs of the world in preparation to rule it in the future. Leping agreed with Elizabeth, saying yes, but he asked Elizabeth if next time they could simply call it an experience and omit the world domination part. Sword Saint Guild President Elder Sword congratulated Mr. Boss for winning the competition. Mr. Boss replied, saying, "Elder Sword, we can discuss such small matters later. Please allow me to introduce to you the two distinguished guests first. First, this is the beneficial who saved me and my daughter from the Dark Apostle, Mr. Leping. And the lady next to him is—" However, before they could say Elizabeth's name, she turned her head toward to Mr. Boss, her eyes starting to glow red. Mr. Boss and Elena, after seeing Elizabeth like this, got really scared. Both of them understood that they couldn't openly reveal Elizabeth's identity. However, Sword Saint Guild President Elder Sword asked the reason why they couldn't introduce her. Mr. Boss, who was scared and afraid of Elizabeth, didn't know what to say. Leping realized that Mr. Boss must be afraid of revealing Elizabeth's identity as the Demon Queen, as that would shake everyone. That's why he was hesitating. Leping asked Elizabeth if from now on he should call her a novice, suggesting it's better to hide who she is. Elizabeth didn't care and told Leping he could call her whatever he wanted. To make the atmosphere better, Leping took the lead and introduced himself, saying they were from a small nation in the south. He was a minister there, and they could just call him Leping. As for the person next to him, that's their princess. However, the butler standing behind Elder Sword mentioned that a princess from the south. His hometown is there, but he doesn't seem to have heard of them. Mr. Boss agreed with Leping, saying that Leping is right, and his card skills were taught personally by him. Leping, blushing, responded, "You're exaggerating. I don't have much talent with cards, but Uncle Boss is the best at it. Actually, I would like to ask Uncle Boss for some advice on swordsmanship too." The yellow-haired girl gets really surprised after hearing this, saying to Blue Sword, "Did he hear this? He wants to learn swordsmanship after giving such powerful cards. What on earth is he thinking?" Blue Sword asks her to be careful. Elder Sword is here, and it's not the time for them to speak. Meanwhile, Elena is really nervous, and she asks Leping if he saw her battle in the square, wondering if her card skills were satisfactory. However, Leping doesn't know what she wants to say. He doesn't know what skills she's talking about. Mr. Boss asks Leping if there was something lacking in her performance and encourages him to be honest. Leping makes a serious face, saying he doesn't have anything to comment on. He just didn't expect them to use his cards like this. Mr. Boss agrees with Leping, saying, "Of course, how could they compare to Mr. Leping? He was so self-centered that he made copies of the cards and created the guild without Leping's permission." Elena asks for forgiveness from Leping, admitting she may have disappointed him, but that's her limit. However, Leping tells them not to be sorry. If they do it like this, more people should be able to participate. He finds it very good. Elena, after hearing this, asks him if Mr. Leping is saying that most people are actually like them regulars, so their card strategy is suitable for them to learn. Leping agrees, saying it's more suitable for promoting the guild. However, he mentions that this is a magical world, and he really envy them for their magic. Suddenly, one of the Sword Saint Guild members, let's call him Uncle Indai, starts inspecting Leping and Elizabeth, thinking it's getting more and more fun. He uses his demonic eye lens to see Leping and Elizabeth's magic power. However, he gets really surprised after seeing that one is casually exuding huge and domineering magic power, while the other is completely suppressed and doesn't reveal any magic power. Elizabeth finds out that he is using some kind of tool to inspect their power, and she is really angry. Mr. Tagore gets really scared, wondering if he has been discovered. But that's impossible. He used the demonic eye lens to observe them, and there isn't any magic reflection. What's happening? What's this strong sense of oppression? Elizabeth asks Leping that she wants to kill one of them. Leping gets really shocked after hearing this and asks her who she wants to kill. He asks Elizabeth to wait a minute, suggesting they leave any questions for the end of the gathering, thinking she shouldn't make things difficult for Uncle Boss. Elizabeth gets really happy after seeing Pudding, and her anger cools down immediately. Elder Sword asks everyone to calm down, enough chit-chat, let's go back to the topic at hand. This time, through the competition, he has invited a few people here. He wants to discuss an alliance as they urgently need to encircle and suppress the Dark Guild. So he asks Butler Ash to show them. Ash puts a bag on the table and asks everyone to take a look, explaining that these are the dark gears collected from the initial stage of the competition to the finals from each player using the Sword of Purification. Plus, Jayla from the Giant Bear Guild, it makes 30 pieces. Leping gets really surprised after seeing this because he doesn't know what dark gear is. Mr. Boss explains that as long as anyone accepts the Dark Guild's power, such gears will grow into their body. He also found such gears in the bodies of the apostles he hunted. The Dwarf Guild president is also really surprised after seeing 30 pieces, wondering if the infiltration of the Dark Guild is well spread. However, the yellow-haired girl asks everyone if Jayla passed the Sword of Purification's test before, and if he accepted the power after that. Red-haired girl Anna says no and explains that there's another possibility. The Dark Guild could have found a way to avoid the purification. Mr. Tagore tells everyone that only those with the lowest degree of fusion can be detected through purification. In the other two cases, they can basically hide in plain sight. In the first case, the fusion degree is the lowest. The host cannot bear it, and suffers the backlash, turning into a dark apostle akin to a puppet. In the second case, the host can bear it, but cannot control it, turning into what they saw on the square today. Eventually, the host becomes a container that gives birth to the great apostle. In the third case, the host can fully control it and gains the power of the Demon King. Their power improves by leaps and bounds, and they become a pillar demon servant of the Dark Guild. However, no matter what kind of change it is, they must still obey the orders of the person who gave them these powers. They become the Dark Guild's loyal servant. Blue Sword asks everyone if he almost became a great apostle back then. Mr. Tagore replies that who knows, he was controlled but not fully integrated. Otherwise, with his skills, he would have become a pillar demon. Elder Sword also agrees with Mr. Tagore, saying fortunately, Mr. Boss came to help. Otherwise, he might not be able to handle this with these old bones of his. Mr. Boss is really happy to help because in the past, he used to be a member of the Sword Saint Guild, so he should help. However, Blue Sword, when the guild was in trouble, was on a mission outside and was unable to fight the Dark Guild. But today, he saw the card skills that killed the 6 pillar demons, so he is convinced of his defeat, saying Elena is really strong. However, Elena replies that, no matter how he looks at it, the main reason for her win is the powerful cards of Mr. Leping. After hearing this, the Dwarf Guild president asks Leping if he made these cards and where he learned that blacksmithing skill. Not just cards, the sword he carried on his back isn't simple either. Leping replies that he just likes to do some handiwork at home to kill some time. There's no blacksmithing involved. The Dwarf Guild president thinks that Leping is so humble, and the yellow-haired girl says that if the Sword Saint were here, the Dark Guild wouldn't dare invade. Red-haired girl Anna asks her to stop, not to talk too much. In front of everyone, Leping, after hearing this, gets really curious and asks Uncle Boss if the Sword Saint is the strongest swordsman and where the Sword Saint is now. However, Mr. Boss hesitates to answer this question, saying it might not be a good idea for him to state his opinion. After all, he's no longer a member of the Sword Saint Guild. But Elder Sword, after seeing this, says to Mr. Boss that it's okay, he can talk about the Sword Saint. Anyway, this cannot be hidden for long. Some news has begun to spread already. The Dwarf Guild president gets really surprised, wondering if the rumors he heard are true. Mr. Tagore explains that after the rebellion of the Sword Saint Guild, not only has their combat power been severely depleted, but their Sword Saint has been missing too. That's why the Dark Guild took this chance to attack. Elder Sword replies that it's true. After the Sword Saint sent information from the mountains half a year ago, there has been no information since. However, Leping is really confused and doesn't know what they are talking about. What is the rebellion? Missing. Butler Ash explains that, to be precise, he should have gone to arrest Elder Axe who betrayed the guild, but he hasn't returned yet. According to Blue Sword, in his previous mission, he was supposed to go to the mountains and help the Sword Saint according to the coordinates, but when he arrived, there was no one there. However, the yellow-haired girl is confused because the Sword Saint has been promoted to a 5-star demon sovereign, 1 foot into the Demon King realm. Shouldn't it be easy to arrest the elder who has just been promoted to demon sovereign? Blue Sword says that no one doubts the power of the Sword Saint, but when he rushed to the mountains that day, his sword's tracks were everywhere. Still, when he climbed the mountain, he got really surprised after what he just saw. He saw half of the region was reduced to flat ground. It's hard to imagine what a terrifying battle they must have had there. Elder Sword explains that Elder Axe obtained a supreme magic weapon. All he knows is that it's a giant axe named Demon Burial, exuding terrifying resentment, and its power is so significant that the Elder can make up for the strength gap between him and the Sword Saint. However, according to the Dwarf Guild president, he went through all the S-class weapons forged by the Dwarf Kingdom, and he didn't find the axe Elder Sword described. He thinks it's also a masterpiece of the Dark Guild. Leping whispers and asks Elena, he still doesn't get it. Who is this elder? Why did he betray the Sword Saint Guild? Mr. Boss explains that the president of the guild is the Sword Saint, and under the Sword Saint, there are 5 elders who assist him in handling various affairs and guiding the disciples. The person next to him is Elder Sword, in charge of swordsmanship, and there are 4 other elders: Elder Dagger, Elder Spear, Elder Shield, and Elder Axe. But as Elder Axe betrayed the guild and launched the rebellion, Elder Dagger and Elder Spear were brutally killed by him. Elder Shield later died in the battle with the Pillars of the Dark Guild. So now Elder Sword is the only one with seniority in the guild. During the rebellion, many took that chance to betray them, including Elder Sword's most valued son, C. Buckthorn Terrais. Leping, after hearing the name Terrais, asks Elder Sword if he is a sword-wielding centaur, wondering if his son is actually a centaur. Then he asks about his wife, but they can't do anything as the artist does not explain about her. Let's get back to our story. So Elder Sword asks Leping if he met his son and how he is doing now. Leping, without any second thought, says, "Oh, he's dead." However, Elder Sword tells Leping that it doesn't matter anymore. This is the fate of the traitor. Now, the combination of many factors has caused the Sword Saint Guild to be in its most unstable times. So, he wants everyone to unite to fight against the Dark Guild. The Dwarf Guild president asks Elder Sword if they just provide them with weapons, the Dwarf Kingdom will have no problem. However, for A or S-level weapons, due to the lack of grinding stones, it would be hard to achieve. Elder Sword, although his father is already thinking of a solution. Mr. Tagore asks everyone, "Please allow me to ask, Elder Sword, as you said, you are in your most unstable times now. Why do you think you can destroy the Dark Guild with our help?" Elder Sword replies, saying that it depends on Boss. He thinks Boss should give up on his own guild and return to serve as the vice president of the Sword Saint Guild. Mr. Boss gets really surprised and asks Elder Sword if he really wants him to serve as the vice president. However, he is afraid that it's not proper after all. He has left the guild for a while now. Elder Sword explains that Mr. Boss is more suitable than he thinks. Cards can be regarded as weapons, just like daggers and flying knives. If Mr. Boss becomes a vice president of the Sword Saint Guild, they can open a new unit and let Elena serve as the elder. However, Elena is really nervous, saying she is not qualified to be an elder of the Sword Saint Guild. Elder Sword says as long as Mr. Boss agrees, he guarantees that everything will go smoothly. The resources of the guild will be used as Mr. Boss wishes, and even he will obey his orders. Butler Ash says, "Senior Boss, the elder is truly sincere in his intentions. The vice president position means you are one person above 10,000. This is much easier than establishing your own guild. Please consider this suggestion. After that, Mr. Boss turns his head toward Leing, asking what he thinks, wondering with the aid of the Sword Saint Guild's fame, wouldn't the card skill be spread around faster? Leing gets really surprised, saying, "Uncle Boss, are you asking me for advice? There is a saying in my hometown that it's much easier to become a senior executive in a large company than starting your own. However, those who are more ambitious will choose to start their own business, so this still depends on their own personal desires." Leing is thinking, as a person with no ambition, he shouldn't be giving advice to others. But Mr. Boss misunderstands Leing's words, thinking, does he think he needs to be someone's accessory to elevate himself? If you only have that much ambition, then he is really disappointed in him. However, Mr. Boss is in a tough situation, wondering if Mr. Leing is trying to aid him, but Elder Sword is so stingy. To reject him directly on such an occasion would be not giving him face. He would offend the entire Sword Saint Guild. Elder Sword asks Mr. Boss if he is still dissatisfied, feel free to put forward any conditions. Mr. Boss stands up from his seat and says, "Elder Sword, you don't need to say anything else. I established my own guild not because I wanted to pursue fame and wealth, but because I wanted to elevate my card skills," Mr. Boss states. He then asks Leing if he can see that his will is firm. Elder Sword asks Mr. Boss if he has thought this through. However, Elder Sword is really surprised and can't feel the aura of this strong man called Leing, suggesting that being taught by him must be an excuse to hide his background. Leing replies, saying yes, good conditions, but he thought that he could rely on his connections to Uncle Boss to learn swordsmanship from the Sword Saint Guild. After that, Mr. Boss refuses to return to the guild, but assures Elder Sword not to worry, explaining that it's his responsibility to eliminate the Dark Guild, and his guild will fully support the Sword Saint Guild in the future. Elder Sword agrees with Mr. Boss, saying he understands. However, according to the agreement, the Sword Saint Guild will recognize the legitimacy of Mr. Boss's card guild. Leing doesn't know what to say. He can only express that Uncle Boss is very courageous. However, for Mr. Boss, the most important thing is Leing's satisfaction, and they have worked really hard to satisfy Leing. Meanwhile, Elder Sword asks Dwarf Guild President, Prince Brian, when will the king return from seclusion, as the provision of A and S level weapons can greatly enhance their combat power. Prince Brian replies that he can't tell Elder Sword, but the shortage of grinding stones is a big issue, and the entire kingdom can't find a proper substitute. The Aristotle kingdom refuses to cooperate, so his father is researching in seclusion. However, they can't do anything right now. Elder Sword doesn't know what to do, so he asks Mr. Tagore what he thinks about the request for the weapons and combatants spell. Mr. Tagore is a neutral party, but if he just casts spells for Elder Sword, it won't be a big issue. Elder Sword then asks everyone to reach a mutual understanding of their plan. He suggests that in 2 months they will gather their forces, try their best to solve the issues at hand, and asks if anyone has questions. Suddenly, Leing raises his hand and asks Elder Sword if he can join. Elder Sword gets really surprised and asks Leing if he means he wants to join the battle against the Dark Guild too. Leing replies, saying no. What he means is Elder Sword Guild recruiting people? He wants to sign up to learn swordsmanship. Although he has been idle for a long time, it's not too late to start learning again, right? Mr. Boss asks Leing if he is joking and why he wants to learn swordsmanship. Leing explains that it was Princess Elizabeth who arranged for him to do this. As for why, they have to ask her. Mr. Boss and Elena, after seeing Elizabeth, do not dare to ask Leing that his plan makes sense. Elder Sword agrees with Leing, but there are many kinds of swordsmanship, so he asks Leing which one he wants to learn and what his magic level is. Leing replies that he tested it before, and it seems to be very low, explaining that he is not very good at magic. Butler Ass says that if Leing is not good with magic, he will have no way of using the magic sword taught by Elder Sword. After hearing this, Leing asks if there are no ordinary swordsmanship that doesn't need magic power. Elder Sword replies that of course there is. However, there's only one person who has mastered this kind of swordsmanship, and that person is the president of the Sword Saint Guild, Sword Saint. If Leing finds her, she'll definitely teach him. Mr. Boss also agrees with Elder Sword, saying indeed, he's afraid only the ones qualified to teach Leing are the Sword Saint. Leing, after hearing this, starts crying, thinking the Sword Saint is missing, and how can he find her? Obviously, they think he's not worthy and refuse to help him. Suddenly, Mr. Tagore asks everyone to wait, uses some kind of magic spell, and suddenly a book appears. He writes something in that book, and suddenly the magic spell starts floating in the air. He says that it just so happens that he has recorded some sword skills spells, so maybe they can help Leing. He gives those spells to Leing, who gets really happy and asks Mr. Tagore how to use them. Meanwhile, Elizabeth has finished eating her pudding, and Leing asks her to look at the spell that records swordsmanship skills. However, Elizabeth doesn't pay any attention to Leing and instantly goes back to business. She gets rid of this bug that's acting clever in front of her. Meanwhile, on the other side, in the desert, a fight is going on. The one who is fighting is the Sword Saint Chichai Sagas, the president of the Sword Saint Guild. She asks Elder Axe to come out and not hide. Elder Axe asks her, "What is your problem? What are you trying to do by pestering me?" She replies that she must clear up his crime of joining with the Dark Guild and eliminate him today. So she uses her Sword Kai technique and attacks Elder Axe. However, Elder Axe uses his demonic axe to block the Sword Saint's attack. Elder Axe uses the power of the demonic axe to counterattack against the Sword Saint, but she dodges his attacks without any problem. Elder Axe says that as the integration between him and the demon burial becomes deeper, the Sword Saint's threat level becomes lower. Soon it will be his turn to harm the Sword Saint. However, the Sword Saint does not care. She warns Elder Axe that if he continues with his stubbornness and unrepentance, he will soon be completely controlled by this axe and lose himself, asking him to wake up and accept reality. However, Elder Axe doesn't care if he's losing himself, explaining that after experiencing this supreme power, he will know losing himself is a privilege. It'll be all fine soon. He asks the demon burial to take over his body, and suddenly Elder Axe's body starts changing. He becomes a female. After the demon burial takes control over Elder Axe's body, she says, finally coming out, resentment. "You dare to abandon me? I won't let you go."